And we are live. What is going on, my wonderful people? I love. And we are now live. Wouldn't be a live stream with myself and the Anti-Tracker if we didn't mess up at some point. Hope everybody is doing well, enjoying that lovely intro that I made that kind of messed up. But you know what? That's okay. We're still going to do it. We are talking about Star Trek Discovery, Choose Your Pain. I say this unironically. I do think this is probably with the exception of the space battle at Battle of the Binary Stars, I think this is probably the best episode I've seen at the moment to date. Michael, just first thoughts. I honestly think this was one of the better episodes. What do you think about that?
It's on par with last week's episode. I think that it is still an improvement from the two-part pilot for sure. I would dare say that this is Michael Burnham's best episode to date, but a large part of that is because we didn't see her as much as we usually see in the episodes, and since it didn't focus in on her and waste its time trying to talk about how awesome she is, that wasn't a distraction.
Yeah. What's going on, Russell and Bad Wolf Gamer? Morning in the UK. That kind of rocks. I do actually agree with you on that. I thought this was the best for Michael Burnham as well. And then you're the one that pointed it out to me that we didn't see a lot of her. For people who've watched the show, they know I have a Michael Sue, which is making fun of the Mary Sue. And you and me kind of talked about this, with the exception of one comment in her space empathy with the Talagrade or whatever, with Ripper. I didn't really have any issues, and I would have never noticed those if I wasn't looking for it. So for this one, I don't think there was any real Mary Sue or Michael Sue. Honestly, this episode shows me that they need to do ensemble episodes, not Michael Burnham focused episodes. What are your thoughts when it comes to that?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though, is that what has always, and I mean always from the very beginning, made Trek great is it's always been an ensemble piece. From the original series through Enterprise, and even with the J.J. Abrams reboots, it's an ensemble show. It's not about one character. Yes, the captain is the lead character of the show, but that's simply because of his position. It's not because, like he's the best character on the show. There are lots of episodes in the original series, in Next Gen and DS9, etc., that focus on characters other than the captain, and some of those shows are some of the best ones, and so the fact that this episode felt more like that, in that we got a little bit into Suru, we got a lot into Lorca in this episode, and we even got more out, and I always forget his name, the engineer,
Stamets.
We got more on him. And of course, then they introduced a new character, because now, and this is just for the politically correct, I guess, because now not only did we have the first gay character, but now he has had two romantic relationships on the show, and nobody else has had one.
I don't think it was. I don't know that it was. I know it was inspired by political correctness, but I don't think it was necessarily as in your face. What's going on?
Here's the thing. I don't care about his.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't care about his sexual preference per se. The thing that's just kind of annoying is that, number one, nobody on the show, has any kind of romantic interest whatsoever except for him. And now we've got him where his first partner was killed, and then now all of a sudden, and apparently just happens to be in a relationship with this other guy. We don't know why or anything, because in just 2 episodes ago, he was mourning the loss of his former partner, and now we see that he's rooming with another guy.
What's going on, Samaravati 3? So if you haven't watched it, this is definitely going to have spoilers. For a quick recap, but before that, Brian, I agree. I think that the show should be ensemble. That's what makes it good. But just to give you a quick recap, Sama Ravati 3, I can't say his name ever. Overall, I think it's the best episode to date, with the exception of the combat sequences that we see, like in Best of the Binary Stars. I think whatever. You also have some great character growth with Saru, with Lieutenant Stamets, with Lorca. I liked Harry Mudd. We're going to get into that, so hold on, Anti-Tracker.
Yeah,
hold on.
Did.
It is definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it, and I think that they're coming a little bit into their stride. So, quick recap: Lorca gets captured, goes to the Klingons. They get free, and they leave, and I think it's done really well. So going into it, at first we have the Starfleet meeting with all of the admirals, and they're talking about how the ship is, it's doing a lot of good, it's winning, but they're extending themselves too much. They may be showing their hand to the Klingons. And at first I was thinking about that, trying to get that through. It kind of makes sense. Now, it obviously was plot convenience so that when Lorca gets captured, it's like, oh, they were right. But let's take that out of it. Let's pretend that we didn't know that's going to happen, or that wasn't the episode. I don't think the Starfleet admirals were in the wrong. I think they were kind of overextending, and the Klingons were going to start looking to see what was going on. So I like that the admirals did that. I also like that the admirals were looking at the captain and talking about how crazy he is to have this mutineer on his ship. I like that the admirals aren't on board with it. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, I disagree with you a little bit from a strategic standpoint. If the Federation has a single ship that can warp to any point at any time, deliver a crippling blow, and then warp out without any kind of trace, and so the Klingons obviously can't pursue them, then why shouldn't they simply send the Discovery all the way to Kronos and drop a couple dozen photon torpedoes on the capital city and then warp out? Why shouldn't they have them do this to every major Klingon outpost? The thing about the Discovery is that their point would be valid if the Discovery couldn't just instantaneously jump anywhere in the universe. Because the problem is that if the Discovery has this OP warp drive that allows them to teleport anywhere in the universe, then they can win the war single-handed. And they don't need the rest of Starfleet to do it, because the Klingons have nothing that can counter it. Even though the Lorca maneuver, as you called it in the last episode, was an excellent display of stupidity in strategics, I think that it's correct that if you have the ability to take out the enemy with one ship, then by all means you should do it, especially if you can't replicate the core of the spore drive.
So there's a couple of things to that, though. So first off, it's a science ship. I know we've seen it take a beating. It is a science ship according to the canon. And so, hold on. Can I finish? Can I finish?
Okay.
So I don't know that it can take a beating if it was to go right above Kronos. So that might be a one jump. That might be a one-sided trip. They might not be able to return. And I don't think that that's very Starfleet. Now, one of the things that I like is that the Admiralty, the captain, everybody is looking at a way to end the war, not win the war. And
that makes no sense.
Well, that's very Starfleet, though, don't you think? Starfleet would want to end the war, not win it.
It's very next-generation Starfleet. It is not very Enterprise / the original series era Starfleet. You don't, and it makes no tactical sense. You don't, and it's like, think about the issues people had, and just taking into the real world for a second, some of the issues people had with the war in Iraq, both wars in Iraq, in fact, and the conflict in Afghanistan and other conflicts around the world, even back to Vietnam, was not ending the war. It was, how do we win? And so, like with Vietnam, we just ended up saying, screw it, we're pulling out. And half the country says, well, we should have never gotten in there in the first place. And the other half of the country is saying they didn't let us actually win the war. With the first Gulf War, same thing. George H.W. Bush pulled out before we actually took out Saddam Hussein, and everybody was like, "What was the point?"
How does this
You
get to
don't
Starfleet?
win. You don't end a conflict by just ending a conflict, especially if you have an enemy that's set up from the first episode of the show. And of course, it goes back to Klingon canon. This is one of the few things that they do right with the Klingons, is that the Klingons consider war to be something to be proud of, to be achieved, and to be won. And they're not going to say, "Oh, you guys don't want to fight anymore? Okay, cool." That's,
I don't
they
know.
have to have an honorable win or die on their feet.
I
That's
haven't
the Klingon way.
I haven't watched the original series, so I can't speak to the. I haven't watched all of the original series like you. I don't have it memorized or anything like that, so I can't say that it's definitively not. I know there is some differences there. I don't know. Again, from the Next Generation, even DS9, wanting to end the war is very Starfleet. Now, maybe it is different. But I mean, overall, again, talking about the admirals, I liked the back and forth there. I enjoyed the conversations. One thing I liked about it too is I think that they did really well with Tilly this time. Wouldn't you agree?
Tilly was better, although I think that their use of the F-bomb in this
Well,
episode...
hold on. We're going to get to that. We're just talking about the first
Well, you're
part.
talking about Tilly.
No,
That's Tilly.
let's
That
talk
came
about
from Tilly.
So you have Michael, who's having some issues. She's going to kill. She's helping kill this animal. It's reasonable for her to have issues with that as an anthropologist. So she's having issues with that. Tilly sits down and is a human. She has a good conversation. She's not just a comic relief at this point. So, I mean, at least when it comes to the interactions and the rapport, do you think that they built her up pretty well on that?
Yeah, I think Tilly, they toned her down in the last episode, and they kept her there in this episode, which is where she should be. She's not the Jar Jar Binks type character that she was when she first showed up.
Right.
And so I didn't hate. I did not hate Tilly in this episode or in the last one, and I didn't have a problem with her except for the sudden we're gonna start throwing F words into Star Trek for some reason. Yeah, and the problem with that, and it makes no sense. It really doesn't. There's no reason to do it except to say, "Ooh, look, we can throw dirty words in the show now." There was no plot reason for it. There was the circumstances. It wasn't even like this huge critical thing where, if you had 20 Klingon ships bearing down and you're screwed, and somebody would say, "Oh, F," and that would make a little bit of sense. But they're just like, "Oh, this is effing cool." What? And you remember when it happened, you were like, "Wait, did she just say that?" And of course, I'm sure a lot of people, when they watch it, they go, "Wait, did I just?" And then, of course, Stamos immediately repeats it back to her. And are they just simply trying to make sure that this is not a family-friendly show, or what's the reason for it? That's what I want to know. Is there a reason for it?
I mean, again, you're getting back to pieces that we're going to get to. I promise you, buddy. But was it Star Trek? No, I don't expect that in my Star Trek. Even though there was cursing in the original movies, there was no F-bombs or anything. But I do. It was levity. I thought it was funny. I thought that it was out of nowhere. It's something you don't expect Tilly to do. But so continuing on with that, there was good rapport there. I liked the character building. This seemed like a character building episode. And they really do well when they're character building and they're not trying to push anything, or it doesn't feel like they're trying to push anything. Mm-hmm. Looking at the comments, you already talked to Russell about this, but Russell says, "I think the Starfleet will not order that because the Klingons may decide to attack Earth." I kind of agree with you. If they could have attacked Earth, they would. They're playing to win, and they're not pulling punches. So I agree with that. Brian Suddy disagrees with you. He says Tilly and the F-bomb was a great piece of the episode. Hot Wheels, what's going up? Yo. And Backwolf Gamer says maybe the Klingons like to prolong wars. I suppose it gives them a bigger military budget. Nah, I mean, Klingons, all they are is military budget. I don't think their budget is based on if they're at war with the Federation.
Well, and we already know the Klingon economy is based almost entirely on the military up until Star Trek 6. And in fact, that's part of the point of Star Trek Six was that because the Klingons were so focused on their military that they didn't have the resources to deal with the catastrophe of the destruction of Praxis. Um, but as far as trying to call dropping the F-bomb a great piece, why?
It was
what
good.
Makes,
it was funny. It was out of the way.
Know.
It was comic. It was comedically done well. It
so
was
you
not,
think that's appropriate for a franchise that for 50 years has been family friendly?
We would call that the straw man fallacy. At no point did I say that. Yes, it is, because you then began to argue that
is it appropriate to put that into a Star Trek show?
That question,
you may think it's hilarious, but
that question is not relevant to if it was funny within the episode. It was funny within the episode. No, it is not Star Trek. We have discussed this already. It was still funny within the episode. I agree.
See, I didn't find it that. Maybe because I'm older than you, I don't know, but maybe to me, just because someone says the F word doesn't make it funny. If somebody, like when in X-Men First Class, when Wolverine dropped the F-bomb to Professor X, was it funny? Yeah, to a certain extent. Did they have to use the F word? No. Did it enhance it by using the F word? Not to me, but I know to some people, oh, it's so funny, and your teenagers that are there with their, because it's a PG-13 movie, they're like, haha, we got to hear the F word. Like that's something awesome or something. I don't find that simply using that kind of language for shock value or gratuitously enhances a film. I just don't.
What is going on, Mr. Pete 8680?
And I'll say this, and by the way, to Bad Wolf gamers, when Data said that in Generations, that was the only moment in Generations that I actually chuckled.
Since we're going to have playback, what did Data say?
Huh?
Read it, because they can't see when they're reading it back.
Data. I didn't want to cuss on your show.
Don't. It says Data says OS in Generations was comedic in its own way.
Right. And that was actually, Data, and because if you know Data from all the episodes of Next Gen, he's always trying to emulate human reaction, and he got it at that point. He knew that was the appropriate reaction that a human would give given the circumstances. And so, yeah, I thought that was hilarious. Now, if Data had dropped the F-bomb there, I probably would not have liked it as much, because I don't think that would have fit.
Right.
I don't think that Star Trek needs to push the boundaries of language in that direction. It's like, do we need a nude scene in Star Trek? Star Trek has never really had a nude scene. Is that something that we need? No, it's not. Are there attractive people on Discovery? Sure. Would some people like to see them naked? Sure. Does that mean it enhances the show? No. If it's gratuitous, it's gratuitous, whatever it may be.
Okay. So we need to push forward, but first we're going to say what's up, Mason and the Brew Monks. Quick thing, I wanted to get your opinion on it, because I think Amish Warrior 88 brought up something which is interesting. How about the whole show is in a mirror universe, or is Section 31? We kind of talked about that before we got on here. I think they're giving a little bit of evidence. Let's not give it away till the end, Anti-Tracker. I think they're giving a little bit of evidence that either something's wonky or they might actually be in a different universe. As for Section 31, I think it's still possible, but it's unlikely. And Anti-Tracker, you're completely against that. You don't think it's Section 31 now, do you?
Well, let me put it this way. And again, this is the problem, is how inconsistent the show is with, all the rest of Trek canon. If the Discovery is a Section 31 vessel, then that means that the Admiralty is in on it. And in prior Trek, except for the Admiral Marcus in Star Trek Into Darkness, which of course is a different timeline than this Trek officially, there's never been a Starfleet Admiral that was in on Section 31. Well,
that's not true, actually.
Well, the Section 31 operates independently. They don't report to Starfleet Command.
Sure, but there's been admirals in DS9 that worked with Section 31.
But here's the thing, is that in this, the admiral on, at least the one admiral that we've seen in more than one episode now, not only is she does she know about the OP warp drive, but she knows about Burnham on the ship. She knows everything that's going on that ship, and she is adamantly against it. All right. Now, when Lorca explains that, well, you guys gave me a lot of latitude to try and win this war however I can, and basically ignores her orders, which is something I mentioned to you right after we saw the show. It seems like Discovery is simply the Star Trek where nobody obeys orders, and apparently there's no consequences for disobeying orders unless you happen to assault your captain.
Yeah, you and me disagree on that. He's winning wars. If I'm an admiral, even if I don't like what he's doing, he's winning the war. So, I mean, I get that they're saying back off because we don't want to give it away, but apparently what he's doing is working, so I don't want to stop his jive.
But then why would they tell him to stop? And she said, you are being given a direct order to stop. And that is, again, where we're getting these weird, inconsistent vibes from the show, because if they're going to let him do whatever he wants, then she can't order him to do anything. If they're not going to let him do whatever he wants, and he does it anyway, then he is insubordinate and mutinous in his own right and needs to be brought up on charges. So the problem is that the show is very inconsistent. They're talking about, ooh, you have Michael Burnham. Well, Michael Burnham basically, yes, she committed mutiny, but so is Lorca every time he takes the ship out and goes on a mission without authorization. And of course, we see in the trailer for next week that they're going to do it again next week. So it doesn't seem like there's any, this Starfleet, at least their chain of command means nothing to them apparently, unless, like I said, you actually assault someone.
Well, you're seeming a little bit upset, a little bit. You're a little antsy. Let's calm you down for a little bit. Let's get something I know you absolutely loved. If you're looking on the screen right now, Michael, Anti-Tracker, I'm sure you can see the D7, which I feel like they did.
Not a D7.
No. So, sir, I have watched Trek since I was a teenager, and that is one of the best D7s on God's green earth. On God's green earth, D7 sitting right there, and it's absolutely excellent. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Can you bring up a picture of a real D7? So that because here, maybe and some of you may not know. I don't know how nerdy you get into the Star Trek lore. The D7 is the one consistent ship in Trek from the original series all the way through DS9. Oh, and even in the Kelvin timeline, we see D7s, and it is the most recognizable enemy ship in all of Trek. And this is now a D7. It doesn't even look remotely like a D7. If anything, it looks more like a Star Destroyer than a D7. And so it makes no sense to me to call that. I mean, when they called that a D7, I was just like, what?
It'll take a second for it to pop up.
Right.
So
that one there is the Katinga class D7 from Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
The fact you know that off the okay.
Yeah.
But so yeah, so I mean, you can tell they look exactly like each other. I mean, just almost instantly. But let's talk about that for a second. So you just sat there and dressed down the captain, who has this ultra secret weapon that we know about. And we think the Klingons might be onto it, so we don't want them to capture or to do anything. And then what do? You put the captain on a shuttle with only one other person, and then you send it on its merry way, even though you're completely worried that the Klingons may be onto what you're trying to do.
They could have made that scene a little bit better by putting the guy in a classic series red shirt.
Yeah.
That's the only way you could have improved that, but yeah. And then apparently the Klingons are badass until Captain Lorca gets a hold of one, and then all of a sudden they're stormtroopers.
I didn't mind that as much. We'll get into that. It was Janeway, not Picard, says Russell. Brian says, what's with the black badges from episode 3, if not section 31? It looks good. It makes you ask questions. I don't know. Hopefully they get into it.
I would say that the section 31 thing would make sense, but not. The problem is that, and this is the writing on this show is very inconsistent. Now, there's good reason for the writing to be inconsistent, and that's because of all the behind the scenes problems they had in production, and they started retooling the series starting with episode 4. which was last week's episode. So it makes sense that we would see these kind of weird changes that don't seem to make a lot of sense. And one of them being the black badges mentioned in the first episode, but then based on the writing in this episode, if this is Section 31, then Section 31 is just Starfleet. Because it makes no sense. Even though, I know the Easter egg of the NCC 1031, and that's why a lot of people said, oh, yeah. And by the way, Mr. Pete, I agree with you 100%. And he says, if that's a D7, this ain't Prime. That is 100% correct, because this, there is no, and aesthetic changes aside, making the view screens look like windows and stuff like that. All that aside, at least, as stupid as I think the Discovery looks, it looks like a Federation ship.
Right. The one thing to it that wasn't part of continuity, I don't think it's a huge deal, I actually liked it, was so they're sitting there talking, or they're doing whatever they're doing. The ship appears out of warp, and the computer says, hey, it's a D7 class battlecruiser. I like that they got that warning. I mean, it was a small thing. I don't think it jives with Prime, but I still liked it. Myself.
Well, and the thing is, when he said, oh, it's a D7, I was like, oh, cool, we're going to see a D7. And then they showed the Star Destroyer, and I was like, what?
So there's one point I didn't like. Well, I'm not saying I didn't like. That annoyed me. And this may be, quote-unquote, getting too picky. But when Saru was talking with the computer, and he says, he talks to the computer, he says, hey,
yeah.
I got a problem. I need to walk through how to fix this problem. That's paraphrasing, but he says something akin to that. And the computer's like, why? It's not your job to know why. Can you please help me get this issue done? Because, I mean,
it's like the computer is sentient.
No, I get that it has ethics programs, but that wasn't even anything that I think would question an ethical subroutine.
No, I'm not saying, well, here's the thing is that, again, and this is things like, okay, you want to modernize it, make it look cool, I'm all for that. But when you try to, change fundamental aspects of the show, the computer in the original series and in Next Generation, etc., is a tool. The computer doesn't do anything that a computer in our real world can't do, except that it has much better vocal recognition protocols. And so you can talk to it rather than have to type everything in. But you see, like in the original series, common thing, hey, computer, calculate if this is possible, calculate how do we do this, hey, computer, initiate this subroutine, whatever. And how many times in Next Generation does Geordi LaForge say, computer, run a level 1 diagnostic? I think that should be like in half the episodes. And so you simply tell the computer to do something and it does it. You don't have a conversation with the computer except in one episode, and that episode is called, ironically enough, The Ultimate Computer from the original series, in which Daystrom, from the Daystrom Institute, for those nerds out there that know the name, designs a computer based on a human brain. And and one thing that Kirk and Spock are like astounded by is they're going, wow, he's talking to the computer, as opposed to simply telling the computer what to do. But now, apparently 10 years before that, we're having conversations with the computer all the time, trying to trick it into letting us out of the brig, and hey, how do I deal with this moral situation that I'm dealing with, or how do I stack? And by the way, I just got to throw this in there. When Saru asked the computer to list the top captains of all time, okay, and it lists Robert April. Okay, that's cool, because Robert April was the original name of the captain of the Enterprise that was never filmed.
Yeah.
But then number 2 on the list, Jonathan Archer.
Yeah, that's
And I was like, really? So Jonathan Archer is one of the greatest captains of all time. Now, I understand why James Kirk wouldn't be on the list, and I did like that Christopher Pike was on the list because he was a captain at this point. But to have Jonathan Archer listed on there is absolutely hilarious to me, especially based on the parameters that the computer gave.
It's like brave, intelligent.
Yeah.
So
it's like courageous, self-sacrificing, all this stuff, and it's like, Yeah, that's Jonathan Archer, all right.
So, two things to this. Justin Brady says, lore, could this Star Trek Discovery universe be an alternate reality, not mirror universe, but closer to the Prime universe? Something interesting that we're going to talk about at the end is I think that it's quite possible that this is an alternate reality or a different universe, and I hope that's what it is, and I hope that we find out that through jumping through time they're going to different universes, which would be really cool. I think it'd be really cool for them to jump and at the end all of a sudden be faced with maybe like the Enterprise, because the Enterprise does exist at this point apparently, and it's the actual Enterprise, the TOS Enterprise. I think that'd be cool. I don't know. Right. I think that'd be cool to do though. So here's my thing. So let's. I'm willing to give a little bit on this and say, okay, it's new technology in the real life. We got new technology. We got all kinds of visuals, all kinds of things we could do they never could do.
Right.
So they want to do a computer that has ethical routines and things like that. And then we could explain it away that Starfleet realized how much that's a bad idea. To have a computer that's willing to fight with you during critical points. But the computer doesn't make any sense. It's like, help me work out something. Well, why do you want that? Because I want to stay ethical, because I need to work through it. Okay, what's your problem? Well, I got something on the ship that's really causing me issues. Instead of asking, what is this on the ship so that I could better help you, it says, eliminate that problem.
Right.
So, I mean, if this is the ethical routines jumping in, it might want to get more information before it says kill the problem that you're having an issue with. Sure. But again, that's just silly. I mean, I really liked this episode, and I liked what that gave us with Saru. I think it built Saru. So I didn't mind it just because it gave us a little more about Saru. I did enjoy that piece. But continuing on, we got. So now we go back to Lorca, who's now in prison, who's in a Klingon prison. And we got Harry Mudd. No, I'm sorry, Hardcore Mudd.
Harcourt Fenton Mudd.
Hardcore, but do they call him Harry?
Harry for short.
Okay.
That's what he says.
Before this, I watched the episodes of the original series so that I could get Harry Mudd. Now this, even the actor, even Rain, says that it was a reimagined character, whether he meant to or not. This is not your granddad's Hardcore Mudd. This is reimagined, as he would say. But I liked this character. And what are your thoughts on him?
Well, I told you this before, and I'm sticking to it, is that I have the same problem with Harry Mudd that I have with the Klingons. Do I hate the character that we meet in this episode in the Klingon prison? No, he's an interesting character. Is it Harcourt Fenton Mudd? No way in hell that is Harcourt Fenton Mudd. And he's dark, he's serious, his tone is all wrong. Harry Mudd is a snake oil salesman and one of the most jovial characters in all of Trek. And this guy looks, he granted the one thing he has in common is that he's out for himself, but I couldn't see Harry Mudd from the original series, like, straight up being a psycho killer. This guy I could. And I don't buy that this is the same character. Again, this is the Prime timeline, then that is supposed to become the character that Kirk meets 10 years later? No.
How'd you like the Stella reference? I thought that was funny, at the very least.
Oh, yeah, and in this, apparently, and of course, we don't know this character very well. I know he's going to be showing up in several episodes, so we'll see. But, in the original series, of course, Stella is, yes, it's his wife, but he hates her with a passion. And that's the reason he abandoned her and went off to try and make a way for himself. But in this one, you swear that Stella is the thing that drives him and inspires him and stuff. And
he bought a moon for her.
Yeah, this could get back to the whole political correctness of this show because they're trying to elevate women. And so, because of the incredibleness of Stella is what inspires Mudd to go, to break the law and get all this money together to buy her a moon to impress her. But then he got in trouble because he fell into debt. Which, of course, I guess we do have money in the 23rd century, but that's a whole other topic.
Right. Well, I mean, the original series had money, so I'm glad that they had that as continuity. My cat's driving me insane. So you have Lorca. He's with another Starfleet officer, which I thought was a plant. I'll be honest. From the moment I saw him, I was like, this dude intends to betray. And then you have Mudd there. And so we were talking about the Klingons. So the choose your pain, this is where it comes from. So what happens is the Klingons walk in and they say, whichever prisoner it's supposed to be, they say, choose your pain. And so what the prisoner does is that they can either take the beating themselves, because choose your pain means somebody's going to get beat. The prisoner can either take the beating themselves or choose someone else to take that beating. And it's a way of keeping the prisoners from bonding. You mentioned that it wasn't very Klingon. It wasn't very honorable. I'll give you that, but I think it's very effective. I think it's a great way to do it.
It would be an effective tool if you were truly trying to keep the prisoners from bonding and everything. It's an interesting torture tactic and everything. But again, it's not Klingon. The Klingon way would be to ask you, if they were going to say choose your pain, then they would literally be asking you, how do you want us to beat you? It would be like if I'm going to shoot you and you say, so you want me to shoot you in the leg or in the arm, or and you get to pick, and that's their idea of honor, is that you can choose how we're going to take you out. But in this, the whole idea of the Klingons enabling people to do cowardice behavior makes absolutely no sense, because the Klingons don't believe in cowardly behavior, and the last thing they're going to do is enable it in others, even prisoners.
So the Right Gamers brought up something. He said he read that canon now is that the Constitution class wore the TOS uniforms exclusively, while the rest of Starfleet had their own uniforms. I haven't read anything like that. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, if you're looking at Star Trek: The Original Series, every starship had the same basic tunic, pants, boot combination.
So,
however, every starship had a unique emblem. The Delta Shield was the emblem of the Enterprise, and so that's why everybody had it on their shirt. But on other starships, people had different emblems. So if they want to now say that, well, in this version of Starfleet, or this visually reimagined idea, that the Enterprise, they're all walking around looking like they're wearing 1960s, sweaters and high water pants, but everybody else is wearing these blue jumpsuits. Why is the Enterprise the only ship that's not wearing the blue jumpsuits? Because we've seen people on multiple starships now, and we've seen admirals at star bases all wearing the blue uniforms. And so you're going to sit there and tell me that the only ship that wears a different uniform is the Enterprise? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, Constitution class. So all the other Constitution classes get it too. But
okay. Well, that still
I agree,
doesn't make sense, because in the original series, we saw starbase commanders who wore the same uniform. Everybody in Starfleet wore the same uniform. The only time you saw uniforms that were radically different was when they were civilian uniforms or alien military uniforms.
Right. So continuing on, I liked Harry Mudd's assessment of Starfleet and him going off on Lorca, because I think that's really what people would say, and it was very Q-esque.
Q-esque.
Q-esque, yes.
As in Robert Delancey's Q?
Yes, as in Q-esque. And what he said is, you want to boldly go where no one goes before, but you're going to get pushback if you do that.
Right.
You're more concerned about exploring than you are about getting us all killed. And I think that...
Yeah, because
I like that
so much exploring in this show.
Well, but I like that he's going off on him, and that it, and I get that Mudd is a bad guy, but from a civilian's point of view, that kind of makes sense to me. Like because Starfleet wanted to explore, They're now in a war where civilians are dying. That seems logical to me. That seems that the civilians might get pissed off.
Well, I'll say this. I saw one person, and this is one of those guys that's like a men's rights kind of guy, but he was going off about all the political correct stuff in the show. And one thing that he pointed out, and unfortunately it's hard to argue with the logic, is that the Klingons, as portrayed in the pilot, are pretty much isolationists, and they don't want anything to do with the Federation, and the Federation doesn't seem to want to tolerate their culture, and so the Klingons are basically pushing back against becoming a homogenous society with the Federation. And honestly, it's that's not entirely the Klingons aren't necessarily being evil in that respect, because they have the right to live their culture as they please. If you don't like, for example, Japanese culture, don't move to Japan, right? If you don't like the culture in the Northeast United States, well, you could move to the South, you could move to the West Coast. There are different places with different ideas and different ways of doing things. And this idea that everybody has to be homogenous as a culture, I think is horrible. And unfortunately, especially in the next gen era, but the next gen in particular, not so much in DS9, but Voyager also had a lot of this, is that the idea is that everybody has to be the same. That's what equality means, is that everybody is the same. Well, that's not equality. That's just the Borg, except without the implants.
Well, yeah, I agree. The way they make them seem bigoted, but I think that's a good point where he's saying, look, they want us to just join them when we don't. Right. Even though he made him look racist, as he was saying.
Right, but that's like when he said in the first episode, that whole thing about him predicting that the Federation was going to say, we come in peace, because he knows what that means. That means that the Federation wants us to be a part of them and, by extension, become them. And they want nothing to do with that.
Right.
And also, it's funny because Noob Sawyer was talking about how the Federation spreads like cancer. One of the best assessments of the Federation, particularly the next era Federation, I think came from Quark during the Dominion occupation of DS9, when he was describing the Federation with the context of root beer with Garak. And he was telling him, yeah, try this drink. It's a human delicacy called root beer. And Garak tasted it, and he's like, oh, it's so sweet and bubbly. And he's like, yeah, but it's horrible, isn't it? And he goes, yeah, it's disgusting. He's like, yeah, and guess what? You drink enough of that stuff, and you start to like it, just like the Federation. And, that's kind of what the Federation is that, like, they just try to get you, come on, you can join us. You can just be one of us.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree.
That's right. Mr. Pete was actually mentioning that same thing.
Yeah. So I can't get a picture of it. I liked the one thing I'll bring up is with Stamets, is when he's going toe to toe with Michael, and he's standing up to Michael because that's what Stamets does, and I forget exactly what the argument's about, but she looks all kinds of out of sorts, and he's like, "Why? What are you doing? Why are you doing that?" And she says, "I'm fighting my urge to set the record straight." And he's like, "Do you want to be right?" What did he say? Hold on. He said,
"Do you want to be right, or do you want to get this done?"
Yeah, do you want to fix the problem? I like the fact that he tells her off. So let's get to a part, and you seem kind of weird when I brought this up. Not necessarily weird. That might be the wrong. You didn't see it, and I don't know that you necessarily agree with me, though it does fit the technical definition when I brought it up. I thought it was interesting that they brought up what is effectively rape with the male Starfleet officer. And it is, make no mistake, she's forcing herself on him. It's not like he can say no, especially as a prisoner. From that context, from her forcing herself on him, especially with the little jab, and we'll get to that later, towards the end of it, Did you have any more thoughts on that? I thought it was interesting that they're having the strong female character be the villain in this instance and raping someone against their will.
Well, the thing is that first of all, there's no rape scene in the episode.
No, but it's still it's implied rape.
The implication is that the guy said that the reason that he's still alive after all these months on the Klingon ship is because the captain took a liking to him. That's all that's said. Now, does that mean she raped him? It could. That's entirely possible.
What were they doing, playing Parcheesi, Michael? Were they sitting there playing Parcheesi? Is that why she likes him? Is that how he entertains her?
You know what?
They're big Parcheesi fans.
But you know what? I don't know, and for all we know, that's exactly what they were doing. We don't know, and so maybe she likes him because she sees that he's a warrior and she likes to fight him. I don't know, but they don't explicitly say. It's not like he says, "Oh yeah,"
It's inferred multiple times. Even at the jab, she's like, "I'm."
Once.
No, at least 3 times. He talks about it twice.
What are the other 2 times?
He talks about it twice, and then when she comes and he's laying there, she's like, "Oh, you can't leave me with all the fun we've been having." Rewatch it. She does.
Maybe, but again, I just I guess for one thing, it just didn't seem that important to me as I was watching the episode.
Implied rape doesn't seem important to you on a Star Trek show, but someone dropping the F-bomb does.
Yeah, that's exactly what you were sitting there saying. Those straw men.
You did straw man.
Yeah. Well, that was a straw man as well.
Okay.
That's not what I said. I said, it didn't resonate to me as far as that. Ooh, rape, rape, rape. I just heard the guy say she took a liking to me, and Patrick saying she didn't say fun. So you might be off on your quote there. But
okay, I was paraphrasing. I guarantee you, she said something similar. Go ahead.
I mean, I know that when she came out, she did say she didn't want him to leave, but she didn't say, "Oh yeah, all that great sex we were having" or something. They didn't. There was nothing explicit about it.
No, you don't know what you're talking about if you say nothing please.
There was nothing explicit.
Okay, there was.
Do you understand what I mean by nothing explicit?
He didn't say she raped me over and over again.
That's what explicit would mean.
Okay.
All right. And so what I didn't say there was nothing illicit going on. I said there was nothing explicit described in the episode saying what she did to him, if anything. So we don't truly know. Like you said, they implied it, sure, but to me that wasn't. The major point of the episode wasn't that she might have been raping this guy.
Well, and the major point wasn't that they said the F-bomb. But you're right; they could have been playing Risk. Maybe she likes checkers. Maybe she loves checkers, big checkers. Man.
And like Hot Wheels said, it was implied, but the F-bomb came out of nowhere. That's absolutely correct. The F-bomb was just like completely random and pointless.
Oh, no. Oh, I just wrote it down. Michael.
You just wrote what down?
I wrote it down. I wrote for the next step. You ready? Let's talk about the interrogation scene. Are you ready to get pwned on the explicitness? Are you ready? Yeah. So he's being interrogated, right?
Right.
And she I forget what she's saying. Your eyes are photosensitive, blah blah blah. And we all have our weaknesses. We all have our things. And he says, yeah, we do all have our weaknesses. Finding what warmth in a human male's arms.
Okay.
And she did not say. Oh no, Captain Lorca. We were actually playing Parcheesi because I need to plan for my Parcheesi games.
Now,
she punched him. Yes, she punished him.
And here's the thing about that. Okay,
but hold on, before you get that, I do want you to respond. I like the interrogation scene. I thought it was done well. Continue.
It was a well done scene. However, here's the thing: is that so he said that line about finding warmth in a human's arms, and she punches him for it because she gets very defensive about that. Now, and based on what we know of Klingons, and this was established, by the way, in Next Generation, your favorite show, Klingons and humans having relations is extremely dangerous for humans, right? Klingons apparently like to do things that, humans can't take. And, of course, they also yucked it up in DS9 with that, with Worf and Dax, how Dax kept having to go to the infirmary with broken bones every time she and Worf would have sex.
They did it with Quark too. Quark actually fell for Klingon female.
Okay. And so if this guy was being forcibly raped by a Klingon female, he hit over and over and over for 7 months, he'd be dead. So I would dare say that it was consensual.
Okay, so first off, a couple of things to that. She could let him heal up. In fact, he even points out while he's in there, why are you being exempt? And he says they let us heal up so that we don't die as quick. So she could let him heal up. Secondly, even if he was 100% on board with it, it is still by law. Well, not law in Klingon, but if you were in the United States of America,
now you're getting into the semantics
it
of
is
whether
rape.
legally
No.
it's rape.
Power. Okay, I hate to sound like I don't like getting into politics on this channel, but some people are about to call me a social justice warrior. The power dynamic, the power dynamics are that he could not say no, so even willingly consenting would still be rape in this instance. Okay. I'm sorry, it is. Okay, turn it around. Turn it around. Let's see how you feel about this. Hold on. Let's see how you feel. You have a female prisoner. You have a
Does
female
that mean that
prisoner.
The doctor is raping the engineer because
Hold on.
he's a superior officer?
Well, what does the USMC code say on that, out of curiosity?
USMC
What?
code.
Not USMC code, whatever. The Military Code of Justice.
Uniform Code of Military Justice prohibits fraternization.
Okay.
Period. But
so with the power dynamic, it could be.
be.
We'll get into that later. Let's switch it around. If there was a male, if Lorca had a female prisoner who was willingly having sex with him and she knows she's doing it to keep her alive, would that be consensual?
You'd have to give more than just that information.
Okay, so there's more context to it. Okay.
There is.
Okay, we can keep going.
Context is for kings.
Yeah.
Remember?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. There's more context on that one. Okay.
Well, no, and here's the thing. Like, for example, like on Battlestar Galactica, you had the relationship between Colonel Ty and Six, and that started out as her being a prisoner on the ship. Does that mean he raped her?
Yes, that is by definition. But okay. We're talking about Star Trek.
You can never have a legitimate relationship with someone unless
if they're your prisoner,
you're on the same side politically.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking. If they're your prisoner, they don't have the ability to consent due to power dynamics. So let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. The Right Gamer said, and the most horrifying episode ever when Neelix had relations with a Klingon. That did happen. He had to actually go to the hospital. So there's that. All right. Interrogation. I like the interrogation scene. I thought it was well done. It seems like something, if Klingons were going to interrogate, I think it was a smart way of doing it. They were able to cause him pain without really harming him, especially with the lights and everything. Was there anything to the interrogation beyond what we just said that you really wanted to add to it or not really?
Well, my only problem with it, and here's the thing, they established Lorca's sensitivity to light in the first time we see him, and I'm fine with that. We didn't need to have him freak out when the Admiral turned on the lights in the office and have him have his little treatment thing for his eyes that he drops as they drag him off and all that, and then show the interrogation scene where they turn on the lights. It's like, do you really need to show us twice in this episode references to sensitivity to light before they expose his sensitivity to light? I thought that was kind of a little on the nose with the writing because it was unnecessary. It was already established, from the third episode on about his sensitivity issues. And
but then how would they know if they didn't set it up in the first act, Michael? How would they remember?
The Klingons had no real. I mean, the Klingons must have some incredible intelligence because they really didn't have any way of knowing, but they knew anyway. Well,
no, it showed a scan. They did a scan of him, and that's where she got it from. So, I overall the interrogation scene I think was done well. There was a good back and forth between the two. So moving on to where it talks about. So you have Lorca, and they finally, somehow, I don't know if they ever set it up, how Mudd knew about his past, right? Because Mudd did know about his past.
Right.
The one thing they did... Oh, before we get into it. Michael or Anti-Tracker and I are friends. We just get passionate about our opinions. Honestly, we're not mad at each other or anything. We go at it and we don't get mad or anything. So some people were wondering if we're actually friends or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we can have at each other and be fine.
Hey, right, gamers, just so you know, as soon as they turned on the lights, I looked over at James and said, I'm just waiting for him to say, there are 4 lights.
They should have had that reference. They should have that would have been funny because I laughed at that. Yeah. So, Mudd somehow knew about Lorca, and the story was that he abandoned his crew when the Klingons boarded the ship and then just let them all blow up. And
he's like, no, it's much worse.
Yeah. But I like that. I like the character building. It explains his eyes, because it didn't explain how his eyes got hurt or whatnot. And, he says, no, here's what happened. I was able to escape. My crew wasn't. I'm not going to let them be clean, because obviously Klingons aren't known for keeping their captives well. So I blew them all to hell. And that's the honest-to-God story about it. I like that as a character building piece, and I like that as part of his background. It makes Lorca more real. It makes him... I don't think he's the bad guy that they were making him out to be, and I think that this is a part of it that kind of proves that.
But here's the... and again, I know that maybe I'm in the minority here, but this, once again, kind of goes into, well, okay, based on what we got in this episode, Lorca was in a battle with the Klingons. For some reason, and by the way, this means that he's only been captain of the Discovery for 2 months, because he said it was a month into the war that this battle took place, and it was not on the Discovery. And so he's only been captain of the Discovery for 2 months, which I'm going to have to check and see from the earlier episodes how long they said they've been working on, because the one dude said he'd been working on this warp drive for years. So it's like, wait a minute, so this ship was just built 2 months ago? Then anyway, it seems a little inconsistent, but the story is
Discovery having continuity issues? No.
Yeah, I know. I know. That's amazing. I know. But so he's the captain of the ship. They're in a battle. Things are going south. How does he get off the ship and nobody else when everybody else is alive?
So
is he sitting there on the bridge and going, "Oh, hell with this," and gets on a shuttlecraft and then says, "Okay, I'm going to blow up the ship"?
No.
Now.
So what I'm assuming happened was they're abandoning ship. The Klingons have boarded.
He's the only one that gets off.
Okay, well, I mean, it says he's the only one. In theory, he could be on a escape pod with other people. In theory, right?
How couldn't blow up the ship from an escape pod?
The computers wouldn't interact with each other.
Wouldn't it violate the ethical protocols?
That's true. Maybe he just out-talked it.
Yeah.
Maybe he did that whole thing.
Computer, please, they're going to be hurt by the Klingons. Oh, okay. Boom. No, but it makes no... you know what? I want a flashback of that battle, because it makes no sense the way they described it in this. Because somehow, the way he describes it, he gets off the ship, but every other crew member is still on the ship, which means he abandoned his crew and then blew up his own ship to kill his crew and prevent them from being taken prisoner. Now, and keep in mind that just 2 or 3 episodes prior, we got to see a ship self-destruct as the Klingons were trying to take them. And that admiral didn't jump off the ship and say, "Okay, guys, good luck." This guy is then promoted to a new experimental starship. It's like, yeah, you did such a great job killing your crew. We're going to give you a new ship. That makes no sense.
I like the Right Gamer says DS9 Starfleet. Wow, remember when we used to make ships in like 1 month with experimental engines? Why can't we do that today?
Yeah, because it took them how many years to make the Defiant? It's like, come on, they should be able to crank the Defiant out in like 2 weeks. Noob
Slayer's right there. He says maybe Lorca lied. It could just be a story. So I mean, in theory,
right? But see, that's the thing though with the way. But here's the thing: is Mudd knew that Lorca was the sole survivor. So that means that either it's exactly what Mudd thought, which is that he abandoned ship and abandoned his crew and everybody else died, or it's as Lorca describes it, where he abandoned the ship and then murdered his crew. Either way, it's not very good. That's not, neither one of those scenarios paints Lorca out to be a competent captain.
So, I don't know. You saw it more than I did. You're making a good point, I guess. I don't know. I kind of saw it more heroic than you did, but yeah.
No, there's nothing heroic about what he did.
Tragic is what I meant. All right, so moving on.
It would be heroic if he ordered his crew to abandon ship and then he did a George Kirk and stayed on the ship and then rammed it into the enemy or something.
But then we wouldn't have him there. That'd be fun. What if he told that story and he's like, and that's how I'm here, even though it makes no sense whatsoever. All right, so let's get back to the Discovery. This show needs to be ensemble. It's excellent when it's ensemble. Michael's right, because of course she is.
Michael's always right.
Ripper.
That's rule number one of this show.
Ripper is getting hurt every time it happens. And I think Saru did a really good job. I think Stamets did a good job. I even liked Michael in it. I liked the Doctor.
Oh,
I liked... Hold on.
One thing we missed, though, and this happened early on in the episode. So I want to... why does Michael have the Force?
Why does she feel his pain?
Yeah, first she can force communicate, of course, with Sarek, and now she can force communicate with the alien blob monster and know that it's got hurt feelings every time.
I think it's because she's an anthropologist. So Sarek is the one doing it to her. Sarek has the Force.
Yeah, because we all know anthropologists know how to feel what the animals feel.
I think an anthropologist would know a reaction better than you or I would know. Wouldn't you agree?
Except that she was not in the room and she suddenly knew it was in pain.
I'm going to give it to them that they were just being stylistic. I get what you're saying.
I get what you're saying. The room, but
no, it's not that she wasn't really in the room. It's just she knows that every time they use it, it's hurting. She doesn't feel it. She just knows that it's hurting. I think you're stretching a little bit on this one. I think she just knows that they're at Black Alert. That means they're using the monster. That means it's in pain. You know?
I don't know. It still seems like, because at the beginning of the episode, she's having that dream about the monster. She has some kind of bizarre, stupid psychic connection with this monster.
I don't think so. So, Michael, if you were in a war, and in order to continue to win this war, you would have to go and torture a dog every day and watch it in pain. Mm-hmm. Would you not empathize and possibly have nightmares about what you have to do to that dog?
If you did, then you have no business being there.
Okay, I disagree with that. But that's what it is. That's where they're getting at. I don't think she empathizes with it. I think she empathizes with it. I don't think she has, like, psychic powers or whatnot. Where was I? What was I talking about?
You're trying to say that when she used the Force, she wasn't really using the Force.
She wasn't. So we're talking about the Ripper and everything. I liked all those back and forths. Anthropology is the science that studies mankind. I thought they studied animals too. Okay, whatever. She knows animals for whatever reason. Maybe it's because she's a Michael Sue, a Mary Sue. I think Saru proved himself as an XO, becoming the CO. I think that he was weak in the first couple episodes, but I think he came into his own. I think Stamets is always great there as the voice of, as the moral compass of Starfleet. He's cocky and he's smart aleck, but he is the moral compass of Starfleet. I think that's really appropriate, and I think Michael actually did well in this with her interactions between the two.
Can I ask you a question though? And I do agree that Saru was at his best in this episode. However, he's also, as we've seen multiple times already, extremely inconsistent as a character. Because, it's one thing to, say something in this episode that might not jive with what happened a couple of episodes ago. But this episode contradicts itself directly. Because at the beginning of the episode, Michael walks onto the bridge and immediately Saru's fear ganglia go berserk, and he's like, oh, because he's afraid of everything, right? And then later in the same episode, Michael's like, "Do you really fear me?" And he's like, "Oh no, I'm just angry with you." Then why did your fear ganglia go all ballistic when she walks into the room? No, you do fear her. It makes no sense. That's a completely inconsistent with his character.
I would agree that it's somewhat inconsistent when the ganglia went off for him to say that I don't fear you at all or that you're not dangerous. I do think that's how someone would act if they're angry. If they blame someone for someone dying and they feel like that person has robbed them, even though they personally may not hate that person, they just hate what that person's done. I think that's an appropriate and realistic response.
You think if you're angry with someone, you feel intense fear?
No, and that's what I'm saying. I think someone would lie and say, I fear you, I think that you're the devil. But really, it's not fear, it's hate.
Right, but his ganglia is not called the hate ganglia.
I just said that that's not consistent. I think that he's acting realistic for a person who hates somebody. Beyond his sixth sense, I don't know. I don't think that is consistent. I agree. But I think it's realistic if someone hates somebody for them to react the way he's acting.
Well, but the thing is, because the fear ganglia even came out of nowhere, because that was not in the two-part pilot. That just...
they talked about it. You never saw it, but they talked about it. And he did reach and touch it.
No, he mentioned that he's sensitive to like he can smell death coming and stuff like that. But they didn't mention the fear ganglia until episode 3.
Okay. I don't know about that. I wasn't surprised when they said it because they always made it seem like he had a sixth sense for it. He even says it. He says, I've continue on. I never.
Well, it's just with Suru, he's an interesting character in some respects, but you got to be consistent. If he's afraid of Michael, there's a certain logic to that because of what he's seen her do. He'd be afraid that she's going to, do to Discovery what he feels she did to the Shinjo. But
Nathaniel brings up something good. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to see if this changes your opinion. He says it's threat ganglia, not fear ganglia.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no. I think that's different.
No,
if he considered her a threat,
but
then it would be. It's not fear. If he considers.
But the thing
is
that it's not, but it's not whether he considers it, because he was not even aware that she was on the bridge when it went off, and that's the thing that, and so I would buy the threat fear response thing that I would buy, except that as soon as she walked into the bridge, before he turned around and saw who it was, his ganglia went off. So, which means it's like he has a psychic ability to sense this stuff, and and they imply that in the first episode where he says he can sense death. And so if it's not a conscious response, if it's something that whenever there's something threatening nearby, the back of his head is gonna grow a bunch of snot tentacles out of it for some reason, then they need to be consistent with it. Either she's a threat or she's not. It shouldn't be, well, I consider that person a threat, because until you turn around and see who that person is, you don't know that person is a threat.
So I have what I consider a reasonable explanation for it. I don't think you're going to buy it.
Okay.
The threat ganglia obviously has to be more than just his thoughts and feelings, or it would make no sense that it would. I can't see the evolution happening unless he has more than just what he sees in his thoughts and feelings.
It's like a spidey sense.
Right. So maybe he can sense pheromones of people who are coming or going or proximity, and that's why it went off.
But well, I mean, I could see that if what would have worked there is if, let's say he's looking at the view screen and his ganglia goes off, and then he goes, and like say he does something like this and just goes, Michael, and then turns around.
Right.
Then I would say that makes sense. But instead, his ganglia goes off and he turns around and then reacts to the fact that Michael has just walked on the bridge, and he's like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" And so the thing is that if he can sense through pheromones and stuff what that, or specifically who that person is, not just that a human walked in, but that it's Michael Burnham that walked in, then he should have known Michael Burnham walked in.
Okay. Again, that was just my thoughts on it. So
Right.
I like the interaction. I also think that Stamets is probably the most consistent character in the show. His character is always
Well,
played
apparently he's
consistency.
like the gay Captain Kirk because he's just like,
Man,
got.
you're stuck
Well,
on that, bro. I think him giving his life, or thinking he's about to give his life, to save the animal. First off, let's talk about Sura wanting to do something that might get the animal killed. Absolutely right choice. Even though Michael is quote unquote right, you have to get the captain back, if for anything, to keep the information. And the only way to do that is to, as far as Sura is concerned, kill the animal. He doesn't have time to test all this stuff. He doesn't have time to try to find another option. This has to get done. So I like the fact that he did it. I like that Michael said, hey, you did a great job. That's what you should have done. And then I like that Stamets, said, when he said, are you ready to go? He says, yeah. And Stamets ultimately is self-sacrificing, or he thinks he is. He doesn't know what's going to happen. He thinks it might kill him. And I think that's what Stamets would actually absolutely do.
No, I didn't have a problem with Stamets' sacrifice. Although it's kind of funny because I think you, me, and your wife all thought that it was going to end up being Michael in that room.
Yeah, that would have been a Mary Sue thing. So I'm glad they didn't do that, because I could have seen what I honestly thought was going to happen is, as soon as they jump, she knows they have to jump back. She leaves. She walks in. Stamets looks at her. He's like, "What are you doing here?" She Vulcan neck pinches him, and then does it.
Right.
And I'm glad they didn't do that. I'm glad that they were realistic about it and didn't make her the hero in this instance. And then he lived, and so. But did we? No, we skipped the part. So we're gonna go back for just a second. This is where the F-bomb happened. So there, you have Tilly, you have Stamets, and you have Michael, and they're trying to figure out how to do this without killing the animal. And I like that Tilly is more than just the comic relief. I like that she's more than just the foil to Michael, because Michael's so serious and everything. She's the obvious foil to her. She actually knows her stuff. She's there for a reason. She's explaining what's going through. So I like that she's intelligent. There's a reason she's there. And then she drops the F-bomb. I thought it was comedic. I liked it. It isn't Star Trek. Even the original series, because I even said that. I was working that out in my brain as we were talking. I was like, well, they cursed in the original series. But as you said, it was classless. They didn't drop F-bombs and things. So it's not Trek. I'll agree. But I thought it was comedic. I thought it did what it needed to do. You want to rehash that real quick, because we have new people too, so you can give your opinion on that.
Well, again, I think that the F-bomb thing, first of all, it just doesn't make sense to me, because and this is from I know this isn't a story element, but this is from a production element, is that Star Trek for 50 years has been known as a series of shows and movies that's about the human condition. It's family friendly. It explores big ideas, and does a lot of interesting things. And then on your first new television show in over a decade, 5 episodes in, because keep in mind, we're 5 episodes in, and now they're going to do it. So, they, at least as far as I know, when we started streaming it, it's not like it said the following program contains explicit language or something. If there are a lot of people that are going to be offended by that, and rightly so, because if you're going to drop that kind of language into a television show, then I think, because I know that, the common thing people talk about with parents and parents getting upset about explicit content in movies and TV is they'll say, well, pay attention to the rating systems, don't watch it. As far as I know, this is not a TVMA show, and it was completely out of place in Trek as a whole. In 50 years of Trek, there's never been an F-bomb until tonight, and they did 2. And not only that, but it wasn't a dramatic circumstance that would warrant such a thing. Where and this is the thing, contrary to what some people may think, I'm not a prude when it comes to these things. I love movies that are dirty and gritty, and like, for one of my favorite movies this year is Logan, and Logan has got more F-bombs than any movie that I've seen this year.
You started out saying you didn't like what they did with Xavier. That you didn't think it was Xavier.
I didn't say it was I didn't like what they did with Xavier in the film, but I loved Logan's journey in this film. But I think Logan was an excellent film, and with the exception now when Xavier was using the F-bombs, it didn't fit to me, and that felt forced and awkward and gratuitous. When Logan said it, it felt perfectly natural. I didn't have a problem with it. And same, with a lot of stuff, this type of thing is, it's what are you trying to do by putting this in there? Is there a purpose to it? Because these types of things, if you're doing a television series, and granted this is a streaming show, so CBS can put anything they want in it because it's not regulated like the censors that work for CBS corporate for their broadcast stuff. But so they can
or their copyright attorneys on YouTube.
Huh?
I said, or their copyright attorneys on YouTube.
But they can do pretty much anything they want with it, and they certainly have the right to. But does that make it? If you're going to write that into a script, you need to make it consistent. If I'm watching a show like Breaking Bad, all right, it's not going to shock me because I'm expecting that throughout the show. It'd be like if I'm watching The Walking Dead and I get squeamish about the idea of zombies, then that's a stupid show for me to watch. If back in the day there was a very gritty cop show called Hill Street Blues, that wasn't a show you would watch unless you wanted that gritty type of content. The Star Trek is not that type of a show, and my Angry Missile. I would agree. When Kirk said "you Klingon bastards" in Star Trek 3, I give props to William Shatner. That was one of his finest moments when he collapsed in his chair. That was really, really good, and that fit. And even if he had used a harsher word, given that his son was just murdered, it would make sense in the story. Data saying the S word, it was silly, but I did get a chuckle out of it. I think Generations was an awful movie all the way around, but I did get a chuckle out of that. But at least it kind of fit the situation. Tilly using the F word, if Angry Missile Fibble says it's face-palmingly awful, I agree. It made no sense. It came out of left field. It's inconsistent with everything we've seen from Tilly. I mean, Tilly is the kind of character you expect to say, "Oh, golly," and then she's the one that drops the F-bomb. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Gee golly, mister.
Yeah, and it's like, the Orville, they throw more harsh language in than Star Trek, but they don't throw in like F-bombs obviously because they're broadcast. But like when they had this huge thing in the Orville last week about being a dick and explaining to an android, much like Data, what being a dick means. And it was hilarious through the show, and you could see that on the Next Generation, if Next Generation used that kind of language. Right. It's consistent on Orville. This is completely inconsistent. We're 5 episodes in, and now someone's going to start swearing?
Well, and by the way, since we're bringing up Orville, we do have a Monday show at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard where we'll talk about the Orville and all kinds of fun things, so y'all should be there too. Continuing on, I agree. It was funny, but it was not Trek. And Sasuma Wimyamana says,
what?
"Hey, Anti, let's get real here. Don't say Star Trek, say Discovery." I mean, it's canon. When, like, for instance, Wednesday will be the... Tuesday will be before the Federation. No, I'm sorry. Wednesday will be before the Federation, talking about the Vulcans. And it's canon that the Vulcans, how they made peace with the Klingons, is that they shot at them. Every canon source, from CBS IP all the way to Alpha, Memory Alpha. So that's what I'm going to report. So it's all canon. Let's move to the escape. I like the escape, and it actually, for me, and it may have been obvious to you, but for me, when they teamed up, when Lorca and then Ensign Redshirt, whoever that was, teamed up, that was a surprise to me, especially since So I was kind of getting irritated. I was going to go off on Lorca. So here's what happens. So the Klingons come in and they look at Lorca and they say, choose your pain, which means he either needs to take a beating or he chooses someone to take a beating. And I like that Mudd's there. He's like, oh God, this is about to get rough for me. Get really, really rough. I thought that was funny. And the ensign, whoever, I don't know if he's an ensign, but he's going to be ensign redshirt for right now, says, choose me. And Lorca chooses him. And I'm like, what the hell? It wouldn't have made... At that time, before I saw what they did, it made no sense for him to choose Mudd and no sense for him to choose the ensign. But it turns out they were faking out, where they both then turn on the Klingons. They're able to beat them and knock them out. Now, Michael, I know you're Anti-Tracker. I know you're about to have some issues with it, and I get that. But
I'm gonna have some issues with what?
Their fight. But hear me out here.
No, actually, I think it was a classic Captain Kirk move.
Okay, because I thought you were about to get upset because they're Klingons versus humans, but I think the humans caught them off guard and they were able to use inertia to win. I think it's realistic that they used inertia to win on that one.
When they beat the Klingons in the jail cell, I did not have a problem with that. What I had a problem with, as far as the escape sequence, was the fact that all of a sudden, all these Klingon warriors were the most inept shooters in the galaxy, as in they made stormtroopers look good.
I liked what you said during it. It's like thank God for the heroes that all of them went to stormtrooper school.
Yeah, apparently all the Klingons on this prison ship went to the Stormtrooper Academy of Marksmanship because, once they, because this is a prison ship. This is not the Love Boat. This is not a science vessel. Well, this is a prison ship, which means there are prison guards that are there specifically to prevent escapes. And these two guys who, apparently have never held a Klingon gun before, are suddenly taking out half the crew of this ship, like they were, and like they're absolute sharpshooters. And every Klingon who's been training with this weapon since they were 3 years old can't hit the broadside of a barn. To be fair, according to you, it was the Love Boat for the prisoner and the Klingon captain. So, so there is some Love Boat going to it, to be fair. What do you mean it's the Love Boat for the... Because she was in his arms. And well, there's that. Yeah, so it is a Love Boat, somewhat. Right. Right Gamer says, Warrior, you're assigned to this prison ship because you are the worst warrior ever. We don't care if you die in a riot. So that makes sense. So I liked him overpowering. So we both agree that it was an all right fight. What I thought was funny was the kill setting for a Klingon blaster is amazing. It almost looks like the transporter effect. Yeah, it was a great visual. Yeah, I don't know how realistic it. There's never been a weapon that could instant kill like that. That wasn't horrific in how it did it. That I know in Trek, at least not in TNG and DS9 or Voyager. I know for sure. Well, the original series phasers would disintegrate you if they were set to kill. Okay. But the visual effects, of course, in the 1960s were just silly. The person would just start glowing and then disappear. Right. And so no, I didn't have a problem with the power of the Klingon guns. In fact, I have more of a problem with the fact that the Federation hand phasers don't do that on this show, because like in episode 2 when the Klingon captain is killed, it just looks like he got shot. That's more consistent. Well, you don't look like you got shot by a bullet like he did, but that's more consistent with TNG and DS9. If a phaser was set on kill, it would knock you down. Right, and that's probably because effects. They didn't want to pay for it. But the thing is, in the original series and in the original series films, a phaser set to kill would disintegrate you. And in fact, one of the best, as far as the visuals of it, is very similar to what we saw with the Klingons when Captain Terrell killed himself in Star Trek II. Right. With a hand phaser. And the... yeah, I didn't think about that. It did, didn't it? Yeah. Yeah, he disintegrated himself just like that. And it's a cool effect. And it also makes it so that you could, and one of the reasons they did that effect, especially in the films, is to maintain a PG rating. Because if somebody is evaporated, it's not gory, and so you can get away with more of that than you can if you have, people getting shot and holes blown in them and stuff. Same reason that they made Klingon blood purple in Star Trek VI was to keep the rating from going to R. Right. But apparently on this show, they want to push it. Whatever. Um, but no, I thought the Klingon blaster effect, or they're supposed to be disruptors. The Klingon disruptor effect was pretty darn cool. I just didn't appreciate the fact that the entire crew of this Klingon ship is an inept, and then now this random guy that the captain finds in the prison cell and busts out, even though he gets shot or stabbed and he's seriously wounded, apparently can outpilot an entire wave of Klingon fighters as well. Not to mention a Klingon battlecruiser.
Well, not just that, and I'm gonna have to get up in a minute and kill my cat. Not just that, but I like how the captain is needing to carry him. And he's like, I'm only going to slow you down. And the captain's like, all right, well, you stay right here. I'll be back when I can. I didn't expect Lorca to ever return, by the way. And then as soon as the woman walks in, all of a sudden he can stand up and fight somewhat.
Right.
I thought that was kind of inconsistent.
Right.
Someone put here, and I wanted to know your thoughts on it. So what did you think about... do you think that maybe he's still a spy? That they're using it as a way to get a spy on board the Discovery?
That's a possibility. I think that would take better writing than what we've seen. But yeah, I mean, it's possible that, I mean, he's a turncoat that, although, and actually I'll say this, he's a white male. So yeah, probably. Because I just realized, it would be, we want to make sure that all the, especially if he's heterosexual, then he's got to be evil in some way. So, yeah, definitely a spy.
Yeah,
I didn't take his ethnicity into account.
Right.
Sorry.
So, all right. So they get out, they escape with the white spy now, apparently.
That could be like a song, White Spy.
So let's get to the ending. So everything goes great. Sura and Michael have their get together. Michael says you did great. Sura admits that, it was, you're not like the worst thing on the face of the planet. Then we get to the scene at the end where someone was saying that they really wanted to see. I think you're going to be a little bit disappointed when it comes to the ending scene. I felt the ending scene was, for me, like every other scene that has romance in it, but it adds the twist at the end. I think most romance in sci-fi is unnecessary. I think a lot of it is from an age when sci-fi wasn't respected as a genre, so you had to have like people who did romance and things like that write sci-fi just to get it on the screen, and they added that to it. I don't need necessarily romance in my sci-fi, and it was like any other sci-fi. I don't care what the genders are. It didn't really add a lot to it for me. There was no character growth for me, and yeah, I get the agenda behind it, but it didn't feel like the agenda for me. It just felt like a romance scene that didn't really go anywhere.
Well, and this was, again, where I get frustrated with writing on any film or TV show is if something is gratuitous. And for those of you that don't understand, gratuitous simply means unnecessary. It doesn't flow from the story. It's not organic. It's just thrown in to throw it in. And, the fact that the engineer happens to be gay, I don't care. The thing with his partner that was on the other ship and got killed, that actually I didn't have a problem with, because that, I thought it was stupid that they're trying to go all politically correct with everything, but overall I didn't have a problem with it because it added some tension between him and Captain Lorca, and it also, it added something to the story. Now I know originally I kind of went off on it a little bit, but on retrospect, looking at it with hindsight, I think that actually worked for me. This one, however, comes out of left field, like, oh, by the way, he and the doctor are shacking up and brushing their teeth together for some reason with space toothbrushes. And, why? What is there, are they throwing this in there just to throw it in like the F-bomb, or is there some reason for it? Because, like I said earlier in the show, is that in this show, unlike prior Treks, there's no character in the show, with the exception of our engineer, that has had any kind of sexual relationship that we've seen. The and that's not what this show is about, which that's fine. I don't care. It's not a romance show. But this scene that you're seeing right here with the two of them brushing their teeth and being all, oh yeah, we love each other kind of thing, is like, well, then why didn't you acknowledge that earlier when the two of you were working together? It seems like if these guys are this close to where they're literally living together in a romantic fashion, not just roommates like Tilly and Michael, but if they are actually in a relationship together, you'd think that when they're having that discussion about the sanctity of life and all that kind of thing, that there would be some hint of it. And, because it's not like, if my wife and I were, working in the same facility and she was in the room and I came in and I was assisting with something, it's not like I wouldn't acknowledge that, hey, that's my wife standing there. It's not like I wouldn't say something to her as a familiar.
It's probably inappropriate though, so that's why they're playing it off the cuff.
Oh yeah, because this show really knows how to go with what's appropriate, right?
So let me. I think it's inappropriate. That's why they did that. KM brought up something. I don't buy it. Let's see what you think. And we'll be ending soon, but KM says, whoa, someone said that the guy they picked up from the prison is actually the white Klingon guy, but altered to look human, and that's how he's a spy. KM also said, remember, they talk about the matriarchy, and the captain of the prison ship was a female, and they did escape pretty easily. Nathaniel, I'm bringing this up because he says white tears. Sigh, despite the white male tears, Shazid Latif, the actor who plays Lieutenant Ash Tyler, is Pakistani and Scottish descent. I doubt his race with factor into whether he's a spy or a traitor. Anti-Tracker was joking, guys. Don't take it too seriously. Yeah. He was just making a joke.
I am not a men's rights activist or anything like that. But I mean, there's no denying this show is going out of its way to be politically correct.
If you instantly go to there, you need to rethink the show you're watching, because it's not the hate feminist or hate MRAs or anything political. It was a joke. Relax when it comes to that. I don't think that this is the white Klingon for a couple of reasons. First off, when that Klingon is albino to the extreme. So when they altered him, they had to do some magnificent alterations to him. Beyond that, let's assume that he was. When they go to look up this guy's records, it's not going to exist. And when he goes to the doctor, they're going to realize, wait, your scans are showing up as a Klingon. Because if you remember the trouble with tribbles, they can actually scan someone, and even if they look human, they can actually be detected as Klingon. So
yes, but that was in the original series canon, which they seem to be taking a crap on at every opportunity. So I wouldn't count on canon as a reason for it to not be. Just like it wouldn't be consistent with Klingons. I mean, I guess it would. The Klingons have used human-looking spies, although it's kind of funny because apparently, in Trouble with Tribbles, the surgical alteration to look human is have lighter skin and no facial hair. That's about it. And as far as the one guy being a traitor or something, I was joking around about, well, I don't know if he's Scottish and whatever. I don't care. I'm just saying that the show does have a propensity towards political correctness, so that was just a joke in that direction.
Right. I mean, Nathaniel's good people. I've talked to Nathaniel before, but
some people get so defensive about those things.
Well, and I mean, in our atmosphere, generally people aren't joking; they instantly go there. So I mean, I get it, but still, it's not the first time that I've had to say it's a joke. But so anyway.
Hey, Time Lords and Klingons have something in common there, Noob Slayer. So maybe they're Time Lords and they're going to have a bunch of TARDISes show up, because that would make sense. I
mean, I get the twist. It'd be an interesting twist. But there's just so many holes with that. I would have a huge issue if it ended up being the Klingon. I mean, he doesn't have any backing. Nobody's assisting him. So how on God's green earth did he how did he get files into Starfleet Archive to all of a sudden make this guy appear? He he
Well, the
would come off
Klingons
as
do
a
every
Klingon.
detail about Lorca's career, so why not? They have perfect intelligence.
Well, yeah, Klingons are well known for their intelligence agencies.
Right.
I don't buy it. Maybe. If it's a twist, it's plot twist. It has nothing to do with anything in continuity or realism, in my opinion. So, then we get to the ending. Nathaniel says, sorry guys, didn't mean to jump to conclusions there. A lot of the criticism over the past few weeks have been weak antisocial justice, borderline racist stuff, so as perhaps a bit as I said, Nathaniel, you're a good guy. You and me have talked before. I don't have any issues with you. And even, I don't even know that it was overly sensitive in this atmosphere. I could see why someone would think that we're going off, because everybody goes off like that. So I'm not mad or anything. I was just, you're the most reasonable I've come about it, but a lot of people have come onto my shows, even the lore stuff, and been like, why are you so liberal, or why are you so conservative, especially on the Dominion War stuff. So it's just like, people, I just want to have fun and talk about lore.
People don't like having fun.
Yeah, I know. I used to do politics. This is why I don't do politics anymore. All right, so back to the ending where he leaves and his image is left there. There's a lot of things that this could be. He could be in like temporal flux, though I wonder why, because they let the being or whatever go. So I wonder why we didn't see anything happening with Ripper when it came to that. That was kind of weird to me. I would love to see this be alternate universe. I would love to see them switch back and maybe meet in the Prime universe. But what are your thoughts on it, Anti-Tracker?
You see, the show is so messed up with its writing. I mean, who knows what direction they're going to end up going with it. If, sure, maybe they've been lying to us all along. It's not really in the Prime timeline. This is some alternate reality created by some other divergent event, and we're going to get to see that in future stuff. But, now that we've established that something weird is going on with reality, as far as because our favorite engineer got to see the entire multiverse apparently, which is interesting. But again, I don't know. I don't think they're going to be hopping universes or anything. I don't believe that this takes place in the mirror universe and I know that's been a popular theory for some. But the problem is that if this was the mirror universe, there would be no Starfleet and Federation. It would be the Star Empire. Starships would be labeled with ISS, not USS. So there's a bunch of reasons why this can't be the mirror universe. If this is some other universe, well, then that just means they've been lying to us from the beginning, which wouldn't really be that shocking or anything.
Did you see him smile? They said he smiled after he left. I didn't catch that.
Well, you're right there. Why don't you bring up the still image and find out?
Why you gotta use logic?
Because, Oh, and that's another thing that I was kind of... I get a little tired of, on this show, everybody trying to invoke logic all the time. And for some reason, logic is just whatever their particular agenda would call for. But like the Doctor was like, well, it would be logical for you to do... it's like, you quit trying to sound like a Vulcan. I just get tired of that. But so you're going to bring up the picture for us?
Yeah, I'm trying to find. I can't. Clicking on it would just cause insanity because it's hard to do with the system. Obviously, this is still images and everything. CBS lawyers, if you're watching right now.
What's a still image?
A still image. It's obviously a still image, and as you know, still images can sometimes move. So I'm trying to get it at the exact point. Hold on.
And I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's Susu. Oh gosh, how do you say that?
That's what I was saying. Susu when I did that.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, the Section 31 thing. I know that's been a popular theory as well, and that would explain some things as far as Lorca's attitude and stuff, but it wouldn't explain other things like what the hell is Saru doing on a Section 31 ship,
or how'd the Admiral know everything?
Yeah, and why would the Admiral be in on everything and issuing him orders? Because if he was actually Section 31 and this Admiral was aware of Section 31 and what he was doing, then she would know that she can't give him any orders, even though she orders him to stop winning the war because we don't want to win right now, I guess. And, it just makes no sense. And it's like, speaking of making no sense, you have all these different angles of why the ship should not use its drive, and yet Suru keeps insisting, well, we're going to use it anyway. If you have, and I know Suru was a newbie as far as being in command, but at the same time, you have your chief engineer, your chief medical officer, and your one expert on the creature itself, all saying, we can't do this. And you're saying, nope, do it anyway. And then, the thing has gone into this stasis where, it can't function. Well, hydrate it, make it wake up. And it's like, we can't do that without killing it. Well, do it.
I don't know. I kind of
buy any of that.
Well, I kind of just, I think he made the right, that's what I would do. I mean, I'm worried that they're going to get the information, and if it kills the beast, I don't want it to, but if that's what we have to do, let's kill this sucker and get our captain back. It's too much of a risk. Get Lorca back dead or alive would be mine. I like how he figured out that Lorca was in the starfighter. We kind of skipped that. They get in the starfighter to escape, and then they notice that Lorca's in the starfighter because of the way it looks like it's running and things. I like how Saru worked that out in his head. I thought that was awesome. I don't know, you may disagree with that, but I thought that was awesome.
Well, but again, okay, so they see these starfighters coming in, and so he figures out that the other fighters are pursuing. I would be okay with that. The ludicrousness of that scene was not him figuring it out. It was the fact that the captain and his injured friend were able to overpower an entire Klingon ship and then steal a starfighter and outmaneuver 5 other fighters. So this is the official transverse now. I think that's the new name for this show. It should just be called Star Trek Transverse.
So, Star Trek Transverse. I was reading something. That sounds wrong. That sounds
it's supposed to.
Okay.
Angry Mr. Fibble was talking about how this could be a trans-dimensional universe. And so I was like,
okay,
the transverse.
Gotcha.
Because, of course, we got to do all the SJW stuff.
I was about to say, I already get enough complaints about you in the comments. So I was just wondering what that's going to mean. The
starfighters did look. Patrick was saying the starfighters looked horrible. They looked like something out of Babylon 5.
Right.
They looked absolutely stupid, and and not that Babylon 5 is a bad show, but it's very dated by today's standards. Right. And but the visuals on the starfighter and the quote unquote D7.
So he was smiling when he left. So I just think it stayed there. I think it just, I don't think he started smiling at it. He was standing. No,
he's just
Pete 8680. No, I'm removing that. No, sir. Bad. Don't repeat it, Mike. Anti-Trek. Bad. Removing that. Don't make me put you in timeout, because apparently I can do that too. So
I think we have our next Star Trek series.
Swear to God. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything political. I just want to make a lore video.
I know. But come on, you got to admit that. And the problem is that I know people take this stuff way too seriously, but it is hilarious how far they're trying to push the politically correct thing on this show. And so that's why I made the joke about if the one guy's white, then clearly he's a traitor.
Right.
Because tell me, Captain Lorca is suspect at best, and then everybody else fills some kind of diversity quotient, and everybody else on the show besides Captain Lorca fills some kind of diversity quotient. It's hilarious, so I'm waiting for when's the new crew member gonna get transsexual surgery? When's that coming? Is Michael going to become a man by the end of the season?
Well, some people actually are theorizing that it's actually that Michael is trans.
A man.
Let me say this, and then we're going to end it. Let me say this. I think that the criticism, when people want to come out and start nitpicking all of this stuff and even make jokes like that, I think that they open themselves up to the criticism reasonably when they try to push it in the conventions, on Twitter, with the news sources, with the writers. When you come out attacking one specific side, it's okay for that side to turn around and say everything, even when it's not meant to be that. And I think that that's reasonable. All that to say this. Guys, if you're watching this, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Also, just so you know, I need you to become, if you want to, I need people to become sponsors. Once I get 2, I can make fancy emojis that we can all use. How fun is that? Hey, if you want to continue to let this channel grow and help me continue to do this for a living, don't forget to check out Patreon at patreon.com/lore reloaded. At a certain tier, I will, in fact, do a lore of your request. So you just go down there, check it out, take a look. Again, don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe. Check out the Anti-Trekker. He's coming out with a really cool episode. When is that coming out?
Later this week, probably on Wednesday, we're going to be coming out with our official review of The Cage. And since, you know, we've been talking about the political correctness of the show, I'll say it. First of all, there's a preview for it on my channel. You can go there right now, Anti-Trekker. Just click on my name, and you can check it out. But one thing that Gene Roddenberry, you know, a lot of people talk about Gene Roddenberry's vision when we talk about Star Trek. And I actually have footage of Gene Roddenberry himself talking about how he casted the original pilot, The Cage, and that he went out of his way to make sure that he did not have an all-white cast. So I went, and this took some time, I'll tell you, that I went frame by frame through the entire episode and looked at every single character in the episode to see, you know, how diverse was Gene Roddenberry's vision. And in case you're wondering, James, because I know you haven't seen the numbers yet, the answer is there's a total of 38 white characters, all but 4 of which are male, and 1 Asian.
Right.
That's it.
He's going to have a counter. It's he takes it a little bit further than I do. He's not afraid to talk politics and everything. And this is one of the reasons I absolutely don't like getting into it, because Nexus says political. Hey, like and subscribe. I'm sorry. Less than 3 minutes out of how long have we been here? Hour 46. If you can't deal with that, then this may not be the show for you. You might want to go take a look at somebody else. Guys, thanks again so much. We will check you on the next Monday. We'll be talking about Orville and all of the cool things they're doing with that, named like
you mean the real Star Trek?
Yeah, the real Star Trek, like a lot of people will say. We'll also be talking about a lot of other fun stuff. So we will see you then. And now I'm going to wait a couple of seconds for it to catch up, and then I'm going to just turn it off. Just going to hit that button, but I got to wait because I want you guys to hear it because it cuts it off, and I don't exactly understand that. And here we